This is my first video update coming to you from Nicosia, Cyprus on this about to rain Friday morning. Let's talk about some news and let's discuss U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham's interview to Fox News that he gave the day of Zelensky's landing in Ukraine, meeting with Biden, and his speech to Congress. Lindsey Graham gave a very interesting interview to Fox News, and I'm going to play a part of it. I'm going to probably speed it up for copyright reasons, just to play it on the safe side, even though I believe that this falls underneath fair use. I will speed up the video a bit, but I think everybody is going to get the general understanding as to what Lindsey Graham is saying. And it's interesting to listen to Lindsey Graham talk about the strategy of Ukraine, of Project Ukraine, because you're hearing it from a chief neocon. Lindsey Graham is a chief neocon who has been involved in all of the U.S. all of the recent U.S. color revolution and regime change operations, whether it be Libya or Iraq, Syria, and Maidan, and now Ukraine. Lindsey Graham has been a driving force in all of these conflicts and regime change operations. So what you're going to hear from Graham is probably not going to be a surprise or shocking, but it is good every now and again to have people like Graham kind of lay out what the actual goal of Project Ukraine was and is. And spoiler alert, regime change in Russia. That was and remains the overall goal of Project Ukraine. And even a bigger goal is regime change in Russia and then the targeting of China. And he comes out and he says it. That is the overall goal. Remove Putin, balkanize Russia. A weak Russia, a balkanized Russia makes China a whole lot easier to take on and to destroy. And Graham lays it all out there in this interview. So let me play it, and then we'll get back and we'll break down what Graham said.
To what extent do you believe this country should continue to aid Ukraine in this fight?
Completely all in, without equivocation. If Putin dismembers Ukraine, he will not stop. China is more likely to go into Taiwan. The world will unravel, and no domestic problem gets better here at home, allowing Putin to destroy Ukraine. Quite the opposite. If you can stop Putin in Ukraine, China will probably rethink invading Taiwan, and the world will be a better place. Nobody's dying over here. No American soldiers. We're spending money, but it's being spent at a good cause, the cause of freedom. So I'm all in. Whatever they need, as long as they need it.
So when you say all in, Senator, would you agree to give Zelensky what he says he wants, which is the long-range attack him, artillery missiles? Would you give him Grey Eagle drones? Would you give him Reaper drones? You give him all that?
I would give him the ability to dislodge Russians from his country. Right now, the Biden administration has done more, and I appreciate doing more, but not the offensive capability to dislodge the Russians from the east, particularly Crimea. So the longer-range weapons would hurt the Russian military more effectively. The drones would be the biggest game changer. If you had these large Reaper gray drones, you would kill tons of Russians without losing any Ukrainians in the endeavor and change the tide of battle. The Biden administration just can't quite embrace victory for Ukraine. I can't.
What do you want to see come from this meeting today, Senator?
Well, I want the administration to up their game and give the Ukrainians the capability to go on the offense more effectively to end the war on terms favorable to Ukraine and us. Here's the problem. There's no off-ramp for this war. Somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. How does this war end? When Russia breaks and they take Putin out. Anything short of that, the war is going to continue. To ask the Ukrainians to give Russia part of their country after all this death and destruction is not going to happen. To signal a ceasefire, Russia will take the opportunity to rearm and come at them again. So we're in it to win it. And the only way you're going to win it is to break the Russian military and have somebody in Russia take Putin out to give the Russian people a new lease on life.
So that was Lindsey Graham speaking to Fox News, chief neocon, Ukraine Maidan, regime change architect, specialist Lindsey Graham, talking about Zelensky. Not Zelensky anymore. It is Zelensky. Talking about Zelensky, his trip to the United States, his speech to Congress, his meetings with Biden. And let's break down what Lindsey Graham said in this Fox News interview when Graham was asked about the extent of U.S. aid to Ukraine. To what extent should the Biden White House go with regards to arming and aiding Ukraine? Lindsey Graham said all in, completely all in, as long as it takes, whatever it takes. The U.S. should go fully all in. The Biden White House should go all in with regards to aid to Ukraine. 50 billion, 100 billion, a trillion. For Lindsey Graham, it's worth it. That's what all in means. And I believe that if this conflict continues, if this does drag on and becomes a long conflict, maybe even a conflict past the actual ground war in Ukraine, well, then a trillion USD is, I can easily see it being spent on what is a regime change operation in Russia. Graham said that if you stop Putin in Ukraine, then China probably rethinks invading Taiwan. And he said the world will be a better place. I think this is pretty standard neocon thinking, which is we've got a strong sovereign Russian landmass right here between us and China, and we need to remove this Russia that is in the way of us getting to China. And so, if we can remove Russia, if we can remove Putin and balkanize Russia, tear it up into 5 or 6 or 7, 8 different pieces, then it makes the pathway to going after China a lot easier. Get rid of the guy right there so you can get to the other guy over there. So you have to remove the object that's in front of you to get to your big prize. Not that Russia isn't a big prize, but an even bigger prize is destroying and dismantling China. So that should come as no surprise that once the neocons are done with Putin and Russia, then it makes targeting China a whole lot easier. Graham said that nobody is dying over here in the United States and that no American soldiers are dying. So spending money is actually, in Ukraine, is actually a good cause. And he said it's the cause of freedom. And you hear this from a lot of U.S. Politicians, that this is actually a really good investment. Regime change in Russia for 200 billion or 300 billion or even a trillion, that's a good investment. And you have a lot of U.S. Politicians thinking that, and you have a lot of Americans. I went to the comment sections of this interview on Twitter, for example, and you have a lot of Twitter accounts which say, yeah, I agree with Graham. That's actually, it makes sense. We're all the way over here. They're all the way over there. Give Zelensky 100 billion. Let the Ukrainian military fight the Russians and weaken Russia. If the Ukraine military is annihilated, then send in the Polish military. If the Polish military is annihilated, then send in the Romanian military. For them, it's, what do we care? We're over here. The Europeans, they're all the way over there. Let them fight the Russians. Let them weaken the Russians. Let them eventually get the regime change in Russia. And it's going to be money well spent without spilling American blood. That's the thinking. And a lot of people have bought into this narrative, but it's a false narrative. So anyway, he said that. And that also shows what these neocons really think of the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian soldiers. To them, they're just a tool. They're not human beings. These aren't human lives. These aren't people with families and wives and children. These are tools to get to a much bigger goal, which is regime change in Russia and then the destruction of China. They're just pawns in this neocon chessboard. Let them fight. Who cares? Let them die over there. We don't care. That's what Lindsey Graham said. Let them die over there, as long as no one is dying over here. Not that they care about the American soldiers dying. It's they care that if the American soldiers die, then it's a threat to their political power. That's what really worries them. Anyway, with regards to weapons, long-range missiles and drones, Graham said, yeah, give Zelensky all of that stuff. Give him long-range missiles. Give him drones. He said, give Zelensky the offensive capability to dislodge Russia from his country, especially in the east of Ukraine and particularly in Crimea. You notice how he focused in on Crimea. Lindsey Graham and the neocons, the Newlands, the Grahams, all of these guys that were involved in the Maidan project in 2014. The McCains, remember McCain popping up at the Maidan giving a speech? When was the last time a U.S. senator just showed up in a foreign country to give a speech to a bunch of protesters? Anyway, all of these people that were involved in the 2014 coup, they're still butthurt at the fact that Putin nabbed Crimea, and he didn't annex it. Crimea ascended into Russia. We need to stop saying that Russia annexed Crimea. The accurate term is that Crimea voted to ascend into Russia. And he's still very upset about that because the big prize in 2014 was Crimea. You get Crimea, you dislodge Russia, the Russian base, the port, the warm water port in Sevastopol, all of this. You dislodge Russia from there, and you put a NATO base and missiles right there in Crimea. You control the Black Sea, and you're right underneath Russia. You're right in the underbelly of Russia to threaten them. That was the big prize, Crimea, and they failed, spectacularly in Crimea. And Graham is still very, very upset about that. That's why he's focused in on Crimea. And this is a signal saying that the neocons, they're never going to stop until they get Crimea back. Good luck with that, but you can see that's on their mind. That's the end goal, is to retake Crimea. Graham said that drones will be the biggest game changer. He said Reaper and Grey drones, they will kill tons of Russians without losing any Ukrainians. It's almost like an admission from Graham that Ukraine doesn't really have soldiers to spare anymore, does it? He understands that the Ukraine military has been annihilated and has been demilitarized. And so what's the biggest game changer now? It's not the HIMARS. It's not even the long-range missiles. It's the drones. Because Graham understands that if you can give the Zelensky government a lot of drones, well, then you can keep intact whatever Ukraine military is left in Ukraine. But that's what he said there. Get the drones to Zelensky, and you can kill tons of Russians. He also said that the Biden White House needs to give Ukraine the capability to go on the offense. And then he said the war ends on terms favorable to the Ukraine and to us, to the U.S., to the neocons. Absolutely, they're running this war because it's not about ending the war on favorable terms for Ukraine. It's about ending the war on favorable terms for Ukraine and for the neocons. And he says that. He's basically saying we are a party to this war. Absolutely, we're running this thing. That's why we want to inflict as much damage as we can on Russia, kill tons of Russian soldiers, kill tons of Russians. Actually, kill tons of Russians is what he wants, so that he can get the regime change in Russia, and he can get to the negotiation table where the neocons, along with their puppet Zelensky, have the upper hand to do what's next in their plan, which is to install their government in Russia. That's their vision. Remove Putin, sit at the negotiation table with our government, our people that we put in place. Graham probably has a big you-know-what for Navalny, so that would probably be his dream, to be sitting across the table from Navalny in a negotiation with regards to the conflict in Ukraine. Anyway, Graham did say that there is no off-ramp for this war. How does this war end? When Russia breaks and they take Putin out. This is a U.S. senator. When Russia breaks and they take Putin out. Regime change. He doesn't care where it comes from, who it is. The neocons, they want regime change. That's the end game. That's how Ukraine wins this war. They win this war with regime change. That is why the Ukraine military. They shell Donetsk city. That's why they shell Belgorod. That's why there are a lot of rumors that the Ukraine military is planning some sort of invasion into Russia, into Belgorod, like actually into Russia. Everything that they do is about inflicting pain on the Putin government. They want to chip away at his public opinion. They want to chip away at his power. They want to chip away at people's trust in Putin. They want to create the dynamics so that someone, somewhere inside the Kremlin, decides to take out the Russian president, decides to create some sort of coup, decides to go for it. That's what they want. That's the goal. That is the goal. No off-ramp. No off-ramp. This conflict, even if it goes past Ukraine, is not going to end until the neocons get their regime change in Russia. That's what they want. Graham said to ask Ukraine to give part of their country is a non-starter, he said. He said a ceasefire is not going to happen. And he said, we, not Ukraine, he said, we are in it to win. We, not Zelensky, not Ukraine. We, as in us, the neocons, and Zelensky. We are in it to win. Russia, the goal is to break the Russian military. Have someone in Russia to take Putin out. Have someone in Russia to take Putin out. He repeats that. That's the only way they're going to win. They realize it. That's why everything that the Ukraine military does, everything is done for PR and media optics at home so that you can pass 1.7 trillion spending bills. But even more so, everything the Ukraine military does, everything that Zelensky is doing, is about creating the dynamics to somehow get a regime change in Russia. That's what it's all about. That regime change in Russia. And then it's China. It's a very simple plan. Not simple in the execution of it, but the thinking of it is very simplistic. We got to take out Russia, and then we can go take out China. And then as neocons, we've cemented our unipolar world order for the foreseeable century. That's how they see things. Interestingly enough, the revelation from Blinken that the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan in order to fund the war in Ukraine, in order to begin the conflict in Ukraine, because that's what Blinken admitted the other day, that the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan. If the U.S. did not pull out of Afghanistan, they would not be able to fund Ukraine. It's Blinken's way of saying, yeah, we pulled out of Afghanistan because we knew that we wanted a conflict with Russia, and we were going to do everything in our power to goad Russia into a conflict with Ukraine. That's why we got out of Afghanistan. That admission from Blinken, and he admitted that, is in a way saying that the U.S. is not capable of waging wars all over the place. It can't do it. It can't occupy Afghanistan and wage a war with Russia at the same time. So it has to disengage from various adventures in various regions, and that's what the United States is doing. It's pouring all of its resources. It's pouring everything it has into Ukraine. Everything, money, weapons, you name it. It's going into Ukraine. And they're leaving holes everywhere else, which is why you see the Middle East aligning with China and with Russia. It's why you see Africa aligning with Russia and with China. The U.S. is losing the entire world. It's going to keep Europe. It's going to keep Europe. It's decided that Europe is easy. Europe is easy for us to subjugate, and it is. Europe is really easy for the U.S. to control. But they're having to pull out of the rest of the world because they just don't have the resources to rule over all these other areas, while at the same time going for regime change in Russia. So, Blinken's statement the other day is an admission. It's an admission that the U.S. just can't be involved in multiple regime change operations and adventures. It has to focus in on one goal, and they've decided that the goal that they're going to focus in on is regime change in Russia. That's going to be the hill that they're going to die on. Regime change in Russia. So I thought that was an interesting admission there. And yeah, the Europeans, I guess the one prize that the U.S. does get out of this, and I don't know if it's a prize or if it's a noose around your neck, but they get a bankrupt and a destroyed Europe, which is going to be 100% dependent on the U.S. and on the U.S. taxpayer. Congratulations, U.S. taxpayer. You are now going to be taking care of Europe for the foreseeable future. But that's going to be the one area of the globe that the U.S. will have dominion over. And even the Washington Post is now running articles saying that that Nord Stream wasn't done by Russians. This is complete fiction. And they're citing European officials as their source. And this is the Washington Post. Keep in mind the Jeff Bezos CIA-owned Washington Post. They're citing several unnamed European officials who have privately acknowledged doubts over whether Russia is to blame for the destruction of the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines. Very, very interesting. This was published on Wednesday. The Washington Post quoted an anonymous European official as saying, "There is no evidence at this point that Russia was behind the sabotage." Well, if Russia was not behind the sabotage, well, that only leaves one country or region or group of people or whatever you want to call it that was behind the sabotage. I mean, but that's fine because the Europeans, they're not going to do anything. So, I think the CIA, the Washington Post, they can run articles like this. They can actually come out and just admit it. I don't think anything's going to happen if the Washington Post comes out with an article tomorrow and says, UK along with I don't know, the US and Poland, they got together and destroyed Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 in order to prevent Germany from backsliding and repartnering with Russia on natural gas. I don't think there's going to be one European leader, not one EU leader, who's going to protest this. Maybe Orban. Orban will. That'll be it. I think every other European Union leader, from Van der Crazy to Mark Rutte to Macron, I think they'll all be like, okay. Schultz will be like, okay. He'll be like, all right. That's fine. Oh, well, golly gee, gosh, what can we do? Yeah, so I think they're fine with admitting this at this point in time. I think the CIA and the Washington Post and the deep state, they can come out and they can admit the truth, because at the end of the day, evil always does want to admit what it's done. That's the nature of evil. Evil can't stay hidden in secret for too long because it has this desire to boast and to admit their mischief. So, I don't think this article comes as a surprise from the Washington Post. And if you want my honest opinion, I think they should just come out and say that they did it. And I don't think anyone anywhere in the European Union, at least, is going to really care. The rest of the world is going to be like, okay, I don't think the rest of the world will be shocked, but they'll be like, yeah, all right. These guys are maniacs, right? I can see like leaders in South America and Africa and Asia. They're going to be like, these guys are maniacs, but I don't think that's anything that they don't know either. Anyway, Clown World? Should we do a Clown World? SBF He's been released on 250 million in bail. So Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX, he is out of prison. That was fast. And supposedly, allegedly, he got released with 250 million in bail, but it's not really what happened. SBF actually was released for zero money. Zero. Basically, in order to secure his release, there just had to be a promise that should he flee, then, 250 million. But it was just kind of a promise, a promissory note. They didn't really have to put up 250 million to get him out. He essentially got out of jail for zero. But, his donations definitely paid off. His donations to the Uniparty definitely won him many, many friends and supporters. But his girlfriend love interest at Alameda that he was partnering up with in this scam, well, it looks like she's turned on him, and she's going to start spilling all the goods as to what was going on. That's the latest news there. So you have a kind of interesting play on this story, an interesting twist. He gets out on essentially zero money. He gets out of prison, but his partner in crime, his girlfriend, is it looks like she's going to turn on him, and she's ready to work with with the Biden DOJ, the feds, the FBI. That's not too encouraging. That is not too encouraging at all, if you ask me. But that's the situation that we have going on. Let's see here. Carolyn Ellison is her name. She's throwing SBF under the bus, pleads guilty to fraud, agrees to cooperate with the Department of Justice, Biden's Department of Justice, the Democratic Party Department of Justice that was benefiting from SBF's donations. We'll see how all of this works out. That's the clown world, everybody. I will leave this video there. The Duran.locals.com. Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. We are also on Rockfin. Take care.